Welcome back to the MMA Museum podcast. I am Miguel Adarati, and I am here with a very special guest. Bart Vale has joined me. Bart Vale is a veteran of the the Battlecade Extreme shows, and obviously the World Combat Challenge in early MMA history. We're here to have him basically tell us how he got there because there was an extensive career before that in Japan and things like that. Bart, how are you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I've heard you speak on other podcasts, and I love the story where you talk about, I think it was called Kickfest, where we understand you come from the Kempo world. They were looking for some type of sponsorship or something that you won. Can you? Well, why don't we start there with that story from you, if you can?
Yeah, I was doing a kickathon for MDA, I think, multiple sclerosis or something like that. The benefit to raise money for Jerry Lewis's. Jerry Lewis had this thing going every year that he would try to collect money for these kids that have multiple sclerosis.
Right.
And so we were approached about doing a kickathon where the kids in our school, at the time, I think I had 7 schools open. And what they would do is take the kids would take their form and try to get their parents or their neighbors to, give them $1 for every kick they do before they put their foot down. And so we did something on that, and we collected just over $5,000. And they came in and gave me, I gave them a check. And they told me that because I raised over 5,000, that when they're doing the actual telethon, they switched on the TV to different places. And one of them will be in Miami at the Aventura Mall, where I would have basically about 30 seconds on TV. And
Great.
if I wanted to do that, and I said, sure. I said, I'll go. It's going to be, it'll be fun. And I took one of my students there, and we got in the ring, and we did some sparring, just, kind of like lightweight, kind of like what we do at the dojo. And I get out of the ring, and I'm taking off my knee top and my belt, and a Japanese guy came up to me, and he was on the audience, and he said he never saw an American as big as I am kick as high and as fast as I was, and would I like to compete in Japan? And I'm going, yeah. And again, you got to remember, in that time, it was in the mid '80s.
Right.
All there was realistically was kickboxing.
Yep.
And again, I'm just assuming we're doing kickboxing because I didn't think boxing, because I was in there kicking and punching, not really just boxing.
Right.
And I had no idea it was going to be any kind of grappling at all. So he invited me to go to Tampa on the weekend to, train a little bit with some of the guys. And so he gave me the address, and it was out at a barn. And I get there, and there really wasn't anybody there except me. And then the Japanese guy, which his name was Masami Soranaka, and we always called him Sammy. So he pulled up in a car, and he has a Japanese kid with him that was half my size. And then we walked around to the back of the barn, and they had a ring outside there underneath a tree. And he said he'd like me to spar with his student. I said, sure. So I go in the barn, I take off my clothes, I put my cup on and my gi pants, and then I'm getting ready to come out. I come back out to the ring with my bag, and I take out my kicks, and I put on my kicks, and then I take out my gloves. I start to put on my gloves, and he says, "Oh no, you don't need gloves." And I said, "Well, I don't want to hit him in the head, with an ungloved hand." it might hurt. He says, oh, it's okay. He has hard head. Hit him, head. Okay. So I said, okay, great. And I got in the ring there. And for about the first 20, 30 seconds, I thought I was doing pretty good. And he had me down on the ground and then was just tying me up like a pretzel. And I was yelling and screaming, foul, cheater. I reminded them of Hiroshima and, all that stuff. And, Sammy was just kind of laughing. And then he hits the ring and goes, oh, I forget to tell you, almost like kickboxing.
Yeah.
That guy says, this is nothing like kickboxing. Kickboxing, we don't go to the ground at all. And then he gets up in the ring and he starts to show me these moves where, he kind of just mopped the floor with me. And I'm going like, oh my God, this is just so cool. There was nothing I even seen like that. I mean, nothing. And I'm thinking to myself, going like, God, this is way cool. And so then I asked him, where's dojos for me to train? Because I figured it'd be in Tampa. And that's only like a 4-hour drive for me. And I could go there at least once or twice a month. And
Right.
he goes, Japan. I said, no, where's dojo in the United States? And then again, he says Japan. And at first, I'm not sure if he understood, and I know terminology for the training area in Japan is a dojo. And of course, in China, it'd be called a kun. But so I'm saying the correct word. And then, I said dojo a couple of times and he kept saying Japan. And then I said, how about school to train? And he went to Japan. So he knew what I was saying. The problem was there was nothing in the States. It was in Japan. And I said, I can't go to Japan. It's too far to drive. He laughed. And he goes, I take you. No problem. And so, shoot, I had to be a week to 2 weeks. I was at his door with my passport. I said, let's go.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I just started. This had to be like, I'm saying probably the early 86, mid 86.
Right.
Is when I first went over there.
And what happened here is obviously you've got a Kempo artist. Bart Vale appears sometimes in around this time in the 80s, like on top 10 toughest guys in the world's list and things like that. So he was a known commodity in the States, but now they took him over to the Japanese side and introduced him is basically Fujiwara-Gumi, which is a pro wrestling or that aspect of it, like a real hard pro wrestling league. So why don't you tell us your first impression there, and clean that up for me if I have any mistakes in there.
Let me just back up.
Okay. Yep. You take it.
It was the Universal Wrestling Federation.
Okay.
And that's where Siam was, and a couple of the other guys, like Maeda was there, and Takada was there. And this was before I even got there, that they had the Universal Wrestling Federation. And it kind of flopped over Japan. It just didn't take off. Everybody just BS. It wasn't real. Didn't work. And it kind of flopped. And so then Fujiwara went over, and again, I think it was Inoki's company, where Inoki had all these guys that were just badasses. And so then, Fujiwara is kind of going up the ladder with these guys, but basically mopping the floor with them. And some of these techniques where you grab the leg and these guys are screaming, these people are going, there's no way that could be real. And then the fans started to get educated on how real it really was by just holding the guy's leg. I mean, you're holding the leg under the heel, just holding it up. And it's funny because that basketball player, Shaq, he's actually a police officer, and I was training in the Miami Beach Police Department, and he had to take this course. So he was there, and they had me grab his leg. And I mean, his foot was longer than my arm. And I grabbed it and put it on like that and lifted him up, and he screamed. He said, "Oh, that's my bad leg." So I grabbed the other leg and did it. And he looked at me and goes, boy, you're the strongest white guy I ever met. You're the strongest black guy I ever met. He laughed about that. He couldn't believe it. Just be holding his leg.
Yeah.
Realistically, it was his own weight that made it
Sure.
hard for him because, you know, when you lift him up and you come up on that bridge a little bit, their body weight hangs. So anyhow, Fujiwara's over there just kind of spanking everybody. The fans are going like, wait a minute, this has to be real. But they went back and started the company again. They couldn't call it Universal Wrestling Federation because that name was already taken. So they had to call it UWF. So that realistically it was just UWF style. And again, everybody just kind of figured it out as, oh yeah, well, that's Universal Wrestling Federation. But realistically, it was just UWF was the name. And that's when Fujiwara started to train people. And again, we didn't have a whole lot of people to do it. We had to go basically finding people to do it, to train. And I don't know, I guess it was probably 80, 88, 89 that we started over at a school over there at Malenko's place, where we had American wrestling on one side, the shoot style on the other side. And that's where Carl Gotch would come and train us and stuff like that. And then, of course, Carl Gotch used to go to Japan every other month and train the boys out there. And again, you know, it was a big part of the style. But what had happened was Fujiwara was actually doing Thai kickboxing over in Japan, was one of the number one fighters in Japan. So like on Monday, he went to the Thai gym, you know, started, you know, punching and kicking and doing all that. And then, you know, the next night he went over to the wrestling gym and he's wrestling in that. And I don't know if it was the wrestling gym or the kickboxing gym that got, you know, introduced first. But what happened was one night, because Sammy and Fujiwara would always hang around. And so they're going to either the wrestling gym or the kickboxing gym. And Soranaka said to Fujiwara, hey, when you get in there, let's just say we went to the kickboxing gym. When you get in there, take him to the ground. You know, take him to the ground. So as soon as the guy, you know, threw a couple of roundhouse kicks, you know, Fujiwara blocked it, shot him, took him to the ground, and, you know, did a arm bar or whatever it was. That guy screaming and yelling. And then they thought it was great. And then the next night when they went to the wrestling gym, Soranaka said the same thing. He said, hey, you know, kick the leg, punch the head, do all that stuff like we did, you know, in the kickboxing gym to the wrestlers. So then all of a sudden you stand there like that and Fujiwara switch kicks and kicks the guy's leg. The wrestler's standing there getting ready to grab, and all of a sudden, you know, he buckles him with one kick to the leg. And then just jumps on his back and does a rear naked choke. And then all of a sudden, you know, we're looking at it, like going like, oh my God, this is devastating. You know, it's okay if you walk into somebody else's, you know, sport and play their sport, they're going to beat you. But if you go in there kind of mixing it up a little bit, you know, you got a better chance. So if you got a kickboxer, you're obviously going to take him to the ground. If you got a wrestler, you're going to, you know, kick and punch and do all that stuff, though.
Right.
And that's when they realized that they needed to develop the style. And, you know, I think they had it really going well by the time I even started training there on a regular basis, because I started there in '86, and I'm always thinking that they had the stuff already put together by '85, because I wasn't there when it was Universal Wrestling Federation. I was there when it was UWF.
Now,
so it had already collapsed.
I understand. Now, I just want to put some context out for some of the listeners. You know, Bart's talking about a special place there because, you know, in the United States, also 60s, 70s, there's nothing like MMA or, you know, anything like that. And what you had really was pro wrestling. And the pro wrestling had, you know, become pro wrestling from that. And then also boxing, you know, in the turn of the century, they were very related. And there was a shoot aspect to them. And that seemed to go away or go underground. But Carl Gotch is commonly regarded as one of those people that carried the flag, you know, through those ages with the techniques and making sure that they got out there. And, you know, the Malenkos
Right,
the
that
whole
was
family of people.
Funaki and Lutaz and all those guys. Steve Bell were considered a shooter.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what a real wrestler was a shooter.
Yeah,
And the only problem was they couldn't kickbox.
right.
All right, all they could do is grapple, but they grappled in the shoot style. And see, that was what Fujiwara and Soranaka was putting together with doing the shoot style with the kickboxing. That's what kind of made it kind of unique. It's same thing with me training in the martial arts. I train in Chinese Kempo, which is a mixture of karate, which is a rigid hard style, and Kung Fu, which is a fluid and a style that kind of redirects the man's force. So it has both in it. And so when you got to shoot fighting, it has grappling in it and it has kickboxing in it. So you can pick whatever you want to do. And that's why I was so fascinated with it, only because I was fascinated with the Chinese Kempo on how it had both two systems in it to make the one system. And that's kind of like what this system had. You know, the shoot style had the kickboxing in it and the shoot style grappling.
Right. Now let's go back a little into those times, because this organization here, this was a hard style of, but these were predetermined outcome fights that they were doing in public, right?
Not all of them.
Okay, and that's I would love for you to fill us in on that stuff, because the bottom line is
when I did the underground fights over in Japan, that was that, and when I say underground fight, it's not like blood sport or anything like that. It was just a company that hired us to go into a club and basically entertain the people in the club. And the thing was when we got there, because all our matches were 30 minutes. And again, okay, the 30 minutes has to, at this event that we were underground kind of thing, it had to go to 30 minutes. You couldn't tap anybody out or you couldn't knock anybody out.
okay.
So what that actually was a real good and hard workout.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you got the guy to tap out or knock out before the 30 minutes, then you weren't going to be invited back to do that. So it was a little bit more entertaining.
Gotcha.
And so then the guy started saying, well, we should do that. We should do that all the time. But the only problem you have with that is the fact that kind of like even in American wrestling where, oh, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to do that. Or the other problem is when you get kicked in the head, and you're supposed to go over, but you got hit in the head, that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's over. But there were some matches that were kind of what I would consider more like a training, because I used to box, and one of the guys I used to box with as a training partner was Trevor Burby. And
right.
We would go in there, but we couldn't get hurt. Because the problem was when he's getting ready to fight. In fact, I was training with him right before he fought Mike Tyson. Is if he got hurt there, he couldn't really fight.
Right.
So what you have to do is go like 3/4.
Yep. No, I'm sorry, but for the fans out there, Trevor Burbick is another name that pops up, pre-UFC in this type of who's the toughest guy in the world. Trevor Burbick and Nobuhiko Takada, the famous Japanese pro wrestler, did matches in 1991, several years before the UFC, and obviously several years before we saw Takada in Pride. So, Bart, I wanted to go over with you from those early days. Let's stay in the early days, because that's the fascinating stuff to me. You brought up Akira Maeda, and Maeda was actually one of your first matches, back in the 80s. And Maeda later on went to form the Rings Company, which, at some point when they were doing their Kings tournaments, may have been the biggest MMA company in the world. What was your experience, and what are your memories of Akira Maeda? What was he like?
He was very, very nice guy. I liked him a lot. He was a good guy. Trained all the time. Always was ready to help people, no matter what it was. And again, they never had the school open. I mean, I remember one time saying to Fujiwara that they should open up and just the regular public just to be able to come in and train. But they never did that. I mean, they tried a couple of times when I was over there. And Maeda was always real helpful on the whole thing. I really liked him a lot. Very nice guy. Didn't have a, very good athlete, but didn't have that attitude like he was better than anybody else. And that to me always kind of impressed me. Just like that guy, Travis Burbage, same way, just regular type of guy. And Shaq, another one, just knows that he's just a regular person. But to everybody else is. I mean, I went to the police department like that, and all the guys in the police department were like goggling over him, like, "Oh my God, look at!" And he doesn't like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And we get in there and train, and the fact he was the only one that could hang with me the whole day. The other trainees and that they dropped out in 30 seconds. Me and Shaq ran around the dojo that they put in. Shaq paid for the whole dojo to be put up in the Miami Beach Police Department.
Yep.
He paid for it, and I had to install it. But, him and I, did it the whole day while everybody sat there and watched us.
Yeah.
But to me, those are nice people, because I met a lot of people in my career that they're good, but they act way better than they are.
Sure.
And that always bothered me about people, because they're not very humble.
And that's interesting, because Maeda later on, as I said, formed the Rings organization, and at that point he was a big personality, like in the media and stuff like that. You actually fought in that Rings organization, so obviously you kept it real between the two of you, but you would have signed a contract to fight for him at Rings, no? So interesting interaction there. Can you describe that?
Yeah. But like I said, what had happened one day, and I was there when the three of them, because it was Fujiwara, Maeda, and Takada. And I was there when the three of them, and this all happened after Sornaka passed away. Sornaka was the glue to that whole company. And as soon as he passed away, everybody went retarded. And so now you got these three guys that all felt, and see, Maeda was, to me, more humble than Takada. Takada, and I don't like people that forget where they come from.
Gotcha.
Especially Funaki and Suzuki, who were nobody until Fujiwara.
And we'll get to them in a bit, but keep that going.
So anyhow, the three of them had got together about money and what was happening and where's the money going and why aren't we making and we should be making and the whole 9 yards.
Sure.
And they argued and fought over it. And again, I didn't know much of what they were saying because it was Japanese and I don't speak very good Japanese. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name that was in there that spoke English and Japanese and was trying to help me understand what they were arguing about. And all I remember was they wanted to split the company up 3 ways. It was going to be Fujiwara-Gumi, Rings, and Takada's was international.
Okay.
WWF International.
Right.
Now, Fujiwara was going to take some of the guys. Maeda wanted to take the Japanese kids, and I think Takada wanted to get all new people. He didn't want any of the people that were already there.
Okay.
And I tried to explain to them, because their theory was, if we were the only ones that sold out the show, we sold out a show every time we had an event. Every time. In fact, we did a fight there at the Tokyo Dome, which holds 60,000 plus people. We did the event on the Tokyo Dome on a Wednesday afternoon. It started at 4 o'clock. The event started at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. We had over 60,000 people there.
That's amazing.
For that Tokyo Dome thing.
That's amazing.
Every time we did a show, we sold it out. Every time. So these guys' theory was, we can make 3 times the amount of money if we all broke up the show. And I try to explain to them, I go, listen, we got 10 people here. And out of the 10 people, some of the people just want to see 4 of them. Some of the people want to see those 4. Some of the people want to see those 2. But when you break this company up, you're not going to get, nobody sold a show after that. Nobody sold a show out after that.
Right.
The fans couldn't afford it. It was 7,000 yen a freaking ticket.
Yep.
They couldn't afford to do that 3 times a week.
And the Japanese culture is very much.
This kid was.
Hey, I'm sorry, I was just going to mention the Japanese culture is very much, strict when it comes to when things like this, they break up. And later on, it showed if you were in Pancrase, you couldn't do Shudo. If you were in Shudo, you couldn't do Pride. And some of those types of rules have their roots in this actual conversation Bart's talking about, I believe.
Right. Absolutely.
So
when they all broke up, they all thought that they were going to make great money. And in fact, what they did was just make it difficult for everybody.
So, and that's Maeda. Maeda, one of the players there, Takada, Nobuhiko, who fought in Pride, was the main event of Pride 1, is in that mix. Where was Tiger Mask? Fill me in on that, because Tiger Mask, we trace it, and that's where Shudo begins.
Yeah. Tiger Mask was there earlier than me. In fact, I saw him a couple of times when I started going over there. I am. And he had left Fujiwara, but he left Fujiwara with Fujiwara's blessing. Takada and Maeda both did. There wasn't anything there, but Funaki and Suzuki, both of them should have been hung.
Okay.
And they left disrespectful. It's like anything else. Business becomes business, and then you sometimes forget where you came from. And I've watched that through my whole career in the martial arts world. Is everybody forget who made them who they are.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're the person, and the person that made them is a nobody. I mean, Gene LaBelle just had that recent thing, that happened to him. And I don't even want to bring it up right now, but again, it was, something like that in the same effect, where, you're nobody to begin with. Like when when Funaki and Suzuki came over with Fujiwara, because I was there before they even showed up.
Okay.
They weren't all that good, in my opinion.
Right.
Because first of all, Soranaka goes to me and goes, Funaki used to box. That's all right. So I got in the ring with him. He stunk.
Mm-hmm.
He stunk, in my opinion. And then he's going, Suzuki's a real good wrestler. Now, I didn't do a whole lot of wrestling, because when I was in school, wrestling was for the guys that couldn't make the football team.
Right.
And I played football. But wrestling, I don't want some guy rolling around on me. I mean, maybe his sister, but not that. So, Suzuki, he's a real good wrestler. And to me, based on what I already could do, he wasn't that good in my opinion.
Right.
He wasn't that good.
Right.
But for them to do what they did to Fujiwara really pissed me off.
And they broke off and formed the Pancrase organization. Pancrase still runs to this day, hundreds of events and has a pedigree, and they are, very in the Pancrase lore, which doesn't go back that far, but the Pancrase lore, they are the founders. Talk about how that offends you.
Yep. I know. It kind of pisses me off. But it even pissed me off. Carl Gotch was the one that came up with the name. I even said something to Carl Gotch to go, how would you do that? How would you not tell Funaki and Suzuki, to back down and do what you're supposed to do instead of running off and opening up another company? But I got the same impression that, okay, so now we had Fujiwara, the UWF would bring Carl Gotch out there, treat him like a king. All right, pay him good. So what I thought was going to happen is, like all these other people that try to steal students, I figure what they were doing was Carl's thinking is, oh, okay, Fujiwara have me out here to train his guys and pay me good, and then Funaki and Suzuki will pay me also to come over there. Now I got 2 students instead of 1. I told Fujiwara, I said, so-called gods, forget it. But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. So, I mean, that's what I saw happening. I was there when it happened. And I know, you know, with Siam, it was no problem. It was Fujiwara's blessing.
Okay.
And again, you know, there were a lot of times I was over there in Japan, and you know, we'd go to an event with Inoki, and I mean, Fujiwara and Inoki were real tight with each other. I mean,
Sure.
real respectful. Both of them both respected each other. There was no real problem there. No problem with Siam. No real problem with Maeda or Takada. Takada was a little bit, to me, more standoffish than anybody else. He was one of those guys that thought he was a lot better than he was.
Yeah, I can see that.
He's good.
Oddly enough, too, he actually probably, you know, box office became the biggest star out of all of them in Japan, you know.
Right.
So, thank you very much for that incredible look. We're going to try to stay right in this neighborhood here. I wanted to ask you, where were you in 1993 when the UFC came aboard? Like, how, you know, you guys are already, you know, experimenting, and there's an atmosphere. There's people here that went on in the 90s, you know, to do things in what we now call MMA and stuff. But, you know, where were you when that first UFC hit?
What do you mean? Where was I?
Like,
Did you? They were in the United States.
Did you watch it? Like, were you aware of it? Or?
I thought it was. Oh yeah. I mean, I thought it was really kind of cool.
Okay.
I really did. You know, the only problem was it wasn't as well organized yet, because they were just, nobody was really trained in it. And it looked like to me that it leaned towards just the grappler. And so to me, it looked like it was just going to be wrestling. And it wasn't as well rounded, because nobody was trained in a style. When we did the shoot style, we trained the guys. I mean, when we were over in Japan like that, every month they had a tryout. Kids would come and try out, and it would be like a 6-hour tryout for them to be accepted into the school. And the UFC, all the UFC was supposed to be was bringing different martial artists together to see which one was better. There's no such thing as UWF style. UCF style. UCF style. When the UFC was designed, it was designed to take different styles to compete against each other, to see which style was better than the other one. And even when I was going to do that World Combat thing, though, the whole platform was designed for a grappler. Right. I made them change the whole floor. It was all set up it was all like a mattress. And as a kickboxer or a boxer, you don't want to be boxing on a trampoline. So I had no spring on that, because then we're going, okay, well, I don't want to grapple, because that's what the UFC started off to be, was everybody was just going to grapple, but nobody was going to be able to kickbox. And right. So it became, you know, an event, kind of like the gladiators and that, kind of an event where different styles would compete, but what they did was they kind of stacked the deck against the stand-up fighters, because the floor was already like a trampoline. And so a boxer or a kickboxer doesn't have the foundation that he would normally have.
Yeah, right. And we're gonna get to the World Combat Championship here in a second. Let me ask you, as we, you know, transition out of the 80s here, and into the 90s and stuff. So at that World Combat Challenge, the announcer credited you for knocking out Ken Shamrock. Now, I'll just ask you, you know, as an honest question, was that a legitimate knockout, or was that a Fujiwara, the predetermined thing, you know, that was fought real hard?
That was, I mean, I straight in the head with with Palm, and and then 3 roundhouse kicks to the head. And we had a little bit of a problem before we even started. You can see when he started smacking the back of my head. I mean, he smacked the shit out of the back of my head. Which, you know, even before the event started, we were told not to hit anybody in the back of the head. And so he did that. I mean, you can see the sweat flying off of my head. And I decided that it was time to, because he dropped his hands, because he can't kickbox. And he dropped his hands, I came in with a straight palm to the head.
Okay.
And then, you know, that's my kicking ability.
And that's fair because if you had some animosity beforehand, that, it's not that rigid. You can get mad in those fights and write your own script, I guess. Is that
no? It happens real quick. You know, it's like Mike Tyson says: everybody has a plan until they get hit.
Now let's fast forward to this. So, what attracted you to the World Combat Championship? Just briefly, that show is a once and done show, but especially looking back at it, through like a historic lens, the show did some pretty good things. It was pretty well organized, and that may be part of the attraction. Yeah, I think the Peterson family put it together. They gave out nice belts. They attracted good people, and they did a lot of like good video vignettes on each of the martial arts. Why don't you talk about your experience? How did they attract you in the first place?
What happened in that one was just somebody contacted me and wanted to know if in fact, I was still contracted by the Japanese, and I had to ask if I could do that event.
Okay.
Because I was already contracted. There were a lot of things that I couldn't do because I think it was 80, 88, maybe 89. I signed contracts for like a year at a time.
Gotcha.
And so I couldn't realistically do anything because I know we had a bad hurricane here in '92, and I didn't want to go to Japan. And of course, the company says, there's nothing more important than the company. And I said, yeah, how about my family?
Yeah.
But they still made me go. But I can remember I had to ask if I could go on that event. And I can't remember who contacted me about doing the event. I can't really remember. I know that they flew me out to California to have a meeting with them and what they were going to do. I know it was some guy that his family was putting up the money, his father, on doing this whole thing and how nice they were going to do it. And they were talking about doing 1 or 2 of them a year. And as long as they did good. And I don't know if the father just said, no, I'm not spending that kind of money, because he did spend a lot of money.
Okay.
And I just don't know if he made that kind of money back to what he spent.
Yeah, it was a difficult world back then with the, UFC's was getting thrown off cable and you start up a new company. And I give them an A for effort, especially with the roster. Your appearance was one of the ones in this tournament that made it extremely attractive because people were curious. Why don't you talk about your first fight? Because, the opponent has since passed away. It also has a legendary status in the MMA world as one of really the most brutal fights, from the early days. Why don't you talk about your experience on that?
Well, like I said, I enjoyed doing these events. I got there ahead of time, and the floor was too cushiony for me. So I said, I'm not gonna fight in this where it's like a wrestling match. I said, I just can't do that, which is funny because I didn't throw any kicks as far as I can remember. And they switched that all up. They made a nice floor for me. And then it was funny because after the fight, Antonio said that the Gracies were always, ducking out from him. They always give him the hardest guy to fight. And Shamrock said the same thing to me. That they always give him the hardest guy to fight. And then by the time they get ready to fight, they're too tired or too worn out to do anything. And you know, because both me and Batonio put each other out.
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't go back out. I mean, they were stitching my eye even, and the doctor said no when they came into the thing like that. And then the doctor couldn't even get my eye sewed. The string is hanging from my eye, and he keeps trying to poke it in. And he goes to me, "You got really tough skin." I go, "No, you got a blunt needle." And I walked out of there, went into my dressing room where my buddy was, Tony Palomar, who was the heavyweight kickboxing champ. I had him sew my eye. And then I'm ready to go. And they said, "Oh, you can't go out. The doctor's not going to let you go back out." I said, "Okay." So I went in and took a shower. I mean, I had a lot of fun.
No, but that was to the great disappointment of everybody. You know, the potential for a legendary match. You beat Batonio. Batonio, you know, was one of those guys that you know you hear, "Oh, I'll never tap" kind of stuff. Batonio lived that. He was there to take a beating, and he was constantly trying things on you too. So it's definitely a back and forth, hard match, and that's, you know, the doctor judge you couldn't do. At the other end, you would have fought Renzo Gracie. Renzo Gracie would have been that next opponent. What did you think of the Gracie and the Gracie legend and stuff like that? You know, now in retrospect, obviously there's disappointment we didn't get the fight.
Yeah, no, it kind of even bothered me when the whole thing was set up like that, because when we were going there picking who's going to fight, Batonio was the first one to say something like, "Why are we fighting?" And I said the same thing. I said, "I just assumed, since we played this whole thing off, that everybody else will do this stuff, but me and Enzo would fight each other." And I said, "Well, this is the way it's picked." And that's, you know, I guess it was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks after the fight where Batonio called me up and said, "You know, you retired me." He says, I'm never going to fight again." And then we start talking about that, about how the Gracies always avoided him. And I mean, even Shamrock said the same thing to me about how they would always put them with the toughest guys. And again, me and Mike put each other out, and that was it. I mean, neither one of us could go back out.
When you look at the databases, Mike Batonio pretty much comes up as 0-1 on his career, but you know, as Bart is referencing here, he was one of those guys. That San Pedro area of California where it was there has very much root. You know, this is where you found the guys that fight under a bridge. Yeah, that was San Pedro, you know, on the docks and things like that. That was happening out there. So very, very interesting character. And I wish we had seen more of him, really.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and again, you know, it's like anything else. You know, you don't know who you're going to pick when they do something like that. I mean, I was really surprised that they didn't have, especially when Black Belt Magazine puts the two of us on the cover. I was really surprised when they said that.
For sure. I actually have a picture of that magazine. I'll show.
Yeah. I look back at it and I said, well, you know what? I'm not going to be mad about anything because, you know, I went there. I had a great time. This is what I did. I mean, at this point, you know, God, I would have did this differently if I would have known. But that's just the way it went out. I got paid to show up. I didn't get paid if I would have won the thing, but it didn't seem like I was going to anyhow. And so I was happy with what they were paying me to show up and do and everything like that. So I was happy with that. You know, it's like the same thing when that last thing I did with Japan when they had me fight 3 events. They had me fight two shoot fighters. Then they had me fight against a kickboxer, and then they had me. It was going to be 3 different people. My arm got dislocated on the second fight, which was a kickboxing fight. My right arm got dislocated, and they thought I was faking. And you know, I went down and I got back up, and you know, the ref wanted me to cover up, and my arm was bent up, but it wouldn't go up over my head. But I could bend it up because the shoulder was out. And then the guy kept hitting me on the right side of my head, and the judge stopped it. And then I said to the judge, I said, my arm's out. So he called, had the doctor come over, and I think they think I was taken. They had me sit in the back room. They kept coming up and go, "How's your arm feel?" I said, "It don't feel any better. It's out. We got to put it back in." And then after 2 hours of sitting there with my arm out, the doctor comes back in. I come go out for the third fight. The doctor comes back in and says, "Well, if it's not better, by the time I come back in here, we're going to take you to the hospital and take a picture." I said, "Well, let's do that." And then we get to the hospital. He takes the picture and he comes out with his mouth dropped down to his jaw, going like, your arm, it is out. Shit, I've been telling you that for hours." Then they couldn't get it back in. They couldn't get it back in. They put me up against the wall in the hospital, and 3 doctors are grabbing my arm, and they had me in my chest up against the pillar. Doctors were trying to pull my right arm to pop it in. Wouldn't move. I said, "Hey, why don't you go outside, get Toyota truck?" And then finally they had to put me under. They put me under and the arm went in. But yeah, I mean, my point being is that, I got paid to do these 3 fights, but I couldn't do all 3 of them. But I still got paid. And, it was a disappointment for me because I wanted to do it. I was doing this not because but I was doing it because I was having fun. And I can remember years ago when I asked Bill Superfoot Wallace, I said to him, I said, "How do you know when it's time to retire? Because you retired, you went off, you're doing great and everything like that." Joe Louis, the kickboxer, he retired and then he came back out and ended up losing. But Wallace kind of retired and never came back out. I said, "How did you determine that? When did you decide, hey, this is the day to retire?" He looked at me and said, "I know it was time to retire when they came to me to do a fight and I asked how much I was going to get paid." He said, "Because at that point then, I wasn't doing it because it was fun." And I thought about that, going like, that's exactly like I was. I didn't care about what was happening at the fights over in Japan hey, I was doing it because it was fun. I went into the WCC because it was fun. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was one thing that somebody asked me to do a fight, and I asked how much I was going to get paid. And then after they told me that, I kind of said, "Well, I really appreciate it. It was great and that, but I'm not gonna do it. It wasn't fun no more. Now I'm asking how much I'm gonna get paid."
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful story, and the bottom line is
because it's fun.
12 years of, from the Kempo background, and to be surprised by, the toughest pro wrestling style on the planet, developing into the other styles. There, it sounds like it was, a great place to be and a great place to, drink up history.
Yeah, I was just fortunate to be at the right place at the right time.
Now, in terms of like Pride and the UFC, now we've talked about Takada. How did you feel when, Pride, we're talking 1997 now, and Takada has, morphed into the big star that is now taking on Rickson Gracie and making the money and is really, has a full Japanese media machine. Was he the guy you expected to come out of Fujiwara and become that big star?
Nope, not at all.
Who would your pick have been?
I thought Maeda would be the one. Well, Maeda opened up a lot of doors in that, but I just, again, Takada did the whole thing in his own country. Maeda got real popular over even in Russia.
Yeah,
we went over to Russia and then competed.
Right, in Holland, and he had a network
over there.
And let's talk about that Russia fight also, because I'll let you tell us about the party and the fun, because Russia can be a fun place. But you fought another one of those sort of like, names from the past, a guy named Andrei Kopylov, who, in rings, Maeda show, defeated several frontline Brazilians, even though he really was like, an unassuming looking guy. Talk about the fight with him, and then talk about, partying in Russia.
Well, the problem was there wasn't a whole lot of partying that I was doing over in Russia because realistically, we did a lot of training.
Yeah.
I mean, I was honored to be training in a place with these guys. They had a story, and they had the one guy there that was like one of the top KBG trainers in Russia. They won't even let him out of that city because he's like supposedly the most dangerous man in the country. And I had an opportunity to train with that guy and work out with that guy. And I mean, it was just, to me, my whole life grew up just training. I mean, that's all I was doing my whole life. I was 12 years old, was training. And I was overwhelmed by being there to be able to train with these guys. Now, as far as partying, I don't remember a whole lot of partying that we did because we were in the dojo at 9. And, oh, yeah, we did go out a couple of times. And we were, I can remember we went out to dinner one time. Because most of the time, we trained downstairs. And then we went up to the second floor at lunchtime. And then after lunch, we went up to the third floor to train with the number one KGB guy. So that's how they isolate those 3 floors. But I can remember going out one night and, they're out there, at a club dancing and having a good time. And that he was always at Midas company competing over in Japan. He wrote a book. In fact, he even gave me the book and autographed it in that. And he knew English pretty good. And they were all excited about being out at this club in that. And I'm going, what's the big deal? And he goes, oh, you don't understand. Here now, Russia free. We don't have communism now. We can party. I go, so what? I said, you party? He goes, oh, no, we can't. We had to be in, couldn't go out at night. Well, what? So they were all excited, and then he's telling me, oh, the young people love this new country. The old people hate it because now the old people have to get like communism, and they're confused. They don't know what to do. But young kids, they love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a lot of fun, but for the most part, you got to remember is our whole objective was training. I would have loved it to just be able to go and party.
No, but that's it.
Really a party guy, so.
And I appreciate that, Bart. A lot of people say I had a blast, because there was some partying involved. But here's a real martial artist who had a blast, training and interacting. I wonder, was the David Rootman? Is that a name? Was that the guy who was in charge of that school?
I tell you the honest truth, I don't know. They made me a member of it. They gave me a plaque and all kinds of stuff. And
okay.
To tell you the honest truth, I don't even know.
Okay, and that's cool. That's cool. No problem.
When I was younger in the martial arts world, I had this guy Joe that would take me around. He was the one that got me really involved in karate. He would take me to all these karate things all the time. We went from a judo school to a kung fu school to a karate school. And we always go out to the Homestead Air Force Base when they do stuff. And one time he's going, oh, we're going to go see this. We're going to go see this guy do this 1-inch punch. It's really kind of cool. You gotta come see him. So we went, and you gotta remember, I'm 12 years old. Okay, and Joe, I think he was probably about 19. He was my buddy's stepbrother. Okay. Maybe he wasn't even that old, maybe, but I'm thinking he was 19. But anyhow, so he took me over there, and again, that's the actual guy doing this 1-inch punch was Bruce Lee. And here I am, 12 years old, standing next to Bruce Lee, and I'm bigger than him. I'm going like, he didn't really impress me. He didn't really impress me. And again, I wasn't really into the martial arts world yet. I was kind of like, watching the Blue Angels flying, and Joe kept hitting me and told me pay attention and all that. But after about when I got 15 is when I got really, really excited about training in the martial arts world for real. And that's when I decided to dedicate my life to it. and try to train with all the people that were what I felt important. Like, Master Yami is one of the guys that I knew from Joe that started me because he had his books, what is karate? This is karate by Master Yami. And when I started going over to Japan, I went to find all these places. And one time, Master Yami invited me to his tournament that he had every May. Invited me to his tournament. I went to his tournament. I met what they called his son, but it was realistically his number one student. He always called him his son. That's who was taking over the organization. But I'm thinking to myself, going like, wow, this is the guy that was in the magazine, in the book, and all that. And here I am now, being invited by him, sitting next to him on his throne and all that.
So for sure.
Like when we, oh yeah, it was kind of neat for me. I was there when the emperor passed away.
And I've heard a story too that. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to tell your story because I heard that you actually have like a flag signed by the emperor that was given to you.
Yeah.
Share that story.
Yeah, we were there. We were there, and the day we couldn't do anything. We couldn't train. We couldn't do anything. Japan was basically closed. I actually met George Bush's Secret Service, and the one guy we were talking because it was kind of nice to talk to people that spoke English.
Sure.
And so I was talking with him, and he had. And when I was a kid, there was a movie called Get Smart.
Sure.
And Get Smart was Agent 86, and he used to have a gun inside his shoe. This Secret Service agent guy had a little Derringer that was in his heel of his shoe.
Awesome.
The Japanese found it. There was no gun came into Japan on that day. Nobody brought a gun into Japan. And he even showed me how the heel came off and the Derringer fit right in there. But anyhow, so we were there. We couldn't do anything. So I said to Soranaka, I said, hey, let's just go to the funeral. We can't do anything. I don't want to sit in here and do nothing because they didn't even want us to train. I mean, it'd be okay if I could weight lift or do something, but we're supposed to be mourning, so we have to show that we're mourning. So I said, let's go. So we walked. I mean, first we took the subway and everything like that, and then we're walking. And as we're walking up the thing, I mean, they had hundreds of Japanese flags going all the way up this walkway. Hundreds of them. So I wanted one of them. And so, we stop and we're talking to people and that, and as we're stopping and talking, I don't speak Japanese. So, Soranaka's talking to everybody and talking to people, and I'm trying to tie a flag. And he kept yelling at me, leave it alone, leave it alone. And I kept trying to take it off, and, different people coming up and walking and talking, and then another group came up, and the other guy said something, and then one guy took it down and then put it on my back and that, and Soranaka and this other guy held it, and then supposedly that the emperor, that is the emperor now, supposedly signed it because according to Soranaka, he wanted to meet me.
Oh, that's cool, for sure.
Kind of funny because he made an effort to walk towards us, and again, I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Sure.
Everybody there was dressed in a dark suit. I don't have a suit, and I'm just wearing my UWF sweat jacket and whatever, and just walking up, and I stand above everybody anyhow. And it's just funny because we met all these people in that, and then he signed it and he gave it to me, and so I thought that was kind of neat.
That's very neat. And the thing about it too is that you stick out in any mall in America. You're a big man. In Japan, that's even he must have obviously known. Oh, that's he watched you fight. The emperor watched your show. He was into it. That's amazing.
Right. We used to, like I said, those underground fights we used to do were just for the Yakuza. And it was a lot of fun because it was besides getting our regular salary, we also got paid if we did the event. We
Sure.
got paid extra for that, couple of hours that you're there, and it was a lot of fun. But it was the whole thing to me is training. And, you train, and again, it wasn't street training because I got into the martial arts because I was bodyguard and I was a bouncer and stuff like that, and I needed that stuff because you have a knife pulled on you or somebody tries to hit you with a bottle, you're not going to grapple with them. You're not going to do a sport kind of a thing. So I needed to, either you hit them in the eyes or throat and take them out. When I got involved in kickboxing, it was a little bit more of a step from point fighting because for me, point fighting was more like a game of touch.
Right.
If you touch the guy, you got to. So it really wasn't skill as much as it was speed. So, here I am, 250 pounds, and at the finals and that, I'm fighting a guy that was 170 pounds. Well, yeah, he's 7 times quicker than me.
Yeah.
And so he always ended up winning unless I really hit him. And
Yeah.
if I really hit him, then I get disqualified for excessive contact. So that's when I said, I said that to Tony Palomar. I said, you know what? I want to do something that I know I won or lost. If I'm laying on the floor looking up, I'm not going to say, did I win? Okay?
Yeah.
I know I lost. But I'm not going to be standing there where somebody touched me and he wins because he touched me.
Sure.
And so that's when I got into kickboxing. I did kickboxing, and that was great. But when I got involved in the shoot fighting, I mean, it just opened up a whole different door. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
But again, not on the street. I mean, I've seen a lot of street fights. I've been fortunate never to end up on the ground.
Right. No, it's amazing.
I've seen a lot of street fights where
I'm sorry to interrupt. What I was going to say was, even early Shuto, which, has roots obviously in the same places. One of the earliest events had something that said along the lines of, we teach a way of life, we teach a style, but it's not violent. And you were at the source of really thinking of the technique and taking, finding the sport. Really, that's what the Japanese really were doing with that type of inventiveness. And it's a very interesting walk down memory lane you've given us. I wanted to ask you too. You did, all those times in the '80s and stuff. What was your best moment? You talked a little bit about the 60,000 seat arena stuff. But you held a belt for you were the champion of the company and stuff. Why don't you talk about your most memorable moment, the best one that comes to mind right off the head?
I really couldn't even come up with one. I mean, every one of them was memorable.
Okay.
I mean, really.
For sure.
I can't pick one that says, oh yeah, that's the one, like football with Super Bowl. I mean, to me, they were all a Super Bowl. I was excited to be there. I was fascinated with the fact of how they kept us in shape and conditioning. I mean, we used to get to the dojo 7 a.m. And from 7 to 2, we did conditioning, push-ups. I mean, they were making up exercise. At one point, I could almost climb a rope upside down.
Oh my God!
Right? I used to do a pegboard with fingertips. I mean, the record to do squat, where you squat down, you hop forward and hop back, was 9,000.
Yeah.
And one day I said to Sornak, I said, "Oh, today I could," because we used to do 500 of those a day.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, one day I said to Sornak, I said, I think I can break record today. Oh, good. Let's go. So we went outside behind the dojo on the platform out there, and I started doing the squats. And I did really good up to about 2,000. And then when I got to 2,000, it felt like my bladder was going to fall out of my butt. And I got to 4,000, and then I couldn't do anymore, and I was ruined for a couple days.
Yeah.
9,000.
9,000.
So 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon was just conditioning. And then from 2 to 5, you had off. Go do your laundry, go grocery shop, eat, take a nap, whatever you want to do. Then you were back in dojo at 5, and from 5 to 9, you were allowed to get up in the ring and do sparring, where you grab somebody and you'd go over the technique and work the technique. You know, Carl Gotch would be there going over the stuff with us, or Fujiwara would be there, or Sornaka would be there doing the stuff, and we were allowed to do something. But for the most part, they were a fanatic about conditioning. Yeah, a fanatic.
I was going to that, the squats, Carl Gotch is legendary for those. And they actually became, part of Ken Shamrock's routine at the Lion's Den. That, that initiation that they're famous for is based on this.
But we all had to do it. We all did a squat, and it wasn't, everybody thought a squat where you just bend down and go up, but the Japanese didn't do that. When you squatted down, your hands had to go behind you, and when you came up, your hands had to go forward, and you hopped forward. Ball of the foot, and then your hands went back, and you hopped back again, kind of like what you were doing on standing broad jump. That was a squat for them.
Wow.
They wouldn't do just squat down and back up. It was always hopping forward and back, hopping forward and back. And again, I started to nickname it squat thrust, because the regular squat that we do is just bend down like you would do when you're weightlifting. You
right.
Bend down, you come back up. Bend down, you come back up. But that's not the way the Japanese did it. And then, of course, we always did our push-ups on a board. We always had this board to where you would go down, you dip, bridge up, come back up. And all their push-ups were done like that. Not traditional like we do, down, up, down, up, down, up. We always did it with a bridge, coming all the way up, coming back up to the up position, kind of like they do on yoga when the back up, their back is way up and their arms and legs are down, and you would go down and you bridge. So all their push-ups were done like that, and then you do it from side to side. You go down the left side, you move over to the right side, come back up. But everything was conditioning.
Yeah,
Fujiwara used to say all the time. This was Fujiwara's big thing to say. That you could have the most expensive car in the world, or the cheapest car in the world. If you don't put gas and oil in either one of them, they don't go nowhere.
Yep, absolutely.
And that gas and oil is your conditioning.
Yep.
If you don't have good conditioning, you ain't gonna go. That's a simple fact. I mean, everybody wants to learn all these techniques and show me technique, but then you can't hang 3 minutes. Get your conditioning first. Once you got your conditioning in that, then we can work on a technique. Like Bruce Lee used to say, he used to always say, don't fear a man that can do 1,000 kicks. Fear a man that can do one kick 1,000 times.
Yeah, yeah.
And, that's what you got to have. You got to have that conditioning. If you're going to go the distance, you got to have that. And we used to do 30-minute rounds.
Yep, for sure.
30 minutes.
And now we've been...
very few of them went 30 minutes.
Yeah. And I'm going to wrap up. We've been going over an hour, and I've learned an incredible amount, and I'm glad that Bart had a chance to tell, some of that history for our fans here, because I'm pretty sure that we've touched on a lot of stuff that American audiences haven't really heard of, not the 80s and the roots of where Fujiwara was the branch, Pride came from there. Pancrase came from there, Shudo came from there, Rings came from there, and Bart helped us, remember a lot of that stuff. So I want to thank him a great deal for that. But you were there 12 years, 10 or 12 years there, and by the end of it, back in the States, '96, everybody remembers the Murakami fight, and you were with John Peretti's Extreme Challenge. First, let me ask you about John Peretti. How he's an interesting character. How was your treatment at his hands?
I can't even remember. So I have to say that it was probably good, because I can't remember anything. Like I said,
okay.
I've always appreciated everywhere I went who invited me to their event, and I've always had a good time on all of them. I've never been to an event that I thought was terrible. They mistreated me. So I'd have to say my experience with him was probably top notch.
Okay, and that's fair. And you fought in one of your last MMA fights, or the last MMA fight, you fought Kazunari Murakami. was this at the point where you were, more thinking about money and not motivated anymore? You're older a little bit. Murakami would go on to be in Pride based on beating you, so the Japanese certainly paid attention to that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that was a fight that I was kind of disappointed that the ref called it, because I know I can remember. I think that was the one that was trying to get the arm bar on him when he had his hands wrapped around my waist.
Okay.
Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so, because the knockout came up against the fence, and he was more surprised than anybody when it came, because you were pretty much dominating from the beginning. It's about 4 minutes in. He caught you, basically.
Yeah, I can't remember the whole fight. The only thing I remember doing, because I know I got punched in the back of the head a few times, which wasn't really bothering me that much. But I know I was trying, for some apparent reason, I was really trying to get the chicken wing, but trying to get his arm, trying to get around the wrist, and then going to try to get around the elbow. And I don't know. I don't know what happened there. If I just lost it and gave up on it and thought I would recoup, I just can't. I can remember looking at it later and saying that I don't know if ref should have called it.
Okay, and that's fair.
Maybe he saw something I didn't. Because again, there were a lot of times that they had me do some reffing fights and that, and you look into somebody's eyes and you don't know if you see them.
Yeah.
And then you would call the fight, and again, that's maybe what he saw. But we were always taught that whatever, the only person that can tell you what you can and can't do would be, besides the rep, would be the doctor, and that was it. And I don't know. I can't, like I said, I can't remember. I know I had fun doing it. I know I was there.
Yeah, and
I can't remember one specific thing that.
Okay, now let me ask you this question, just because this will be the last question, so we can wrap up with Bart. We've taken up a lot of his time, but Bart, one consistent thing in this interview is that you've been, kind of enjoying it, like just enjoying the process, the learning and everything like that, like a real martial arts experience, and do you wish that you were, 10 years younger or 15 years younger for the MMA stuff, or are you satisfied that MMA wasn't, I'm talking about MMA now, like, with all the rules and stuff like that. What you did with it was NHB.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it would make a difference for me. It's kind of like, I was fascinated getting involved in it only because it was a platform that I never seen. But what they're doing now is it's kind of like the ground and pound kind of a thing that I can remember seeing that until they put in more rules. I mean, again, it's like any other sport. It's if you enjoy that sport, that's what and you're trained into that sport, that's what you're going to do. And if I was 10 years younger and I got into it, I mean, who knows? I mean, I might enjoy it just as much as I did then. I mean, I wouldn't even know.
That's a really fair answer. That's a really fair answer. I think it's been a great interview. Very enlightening, because simply put, very few fans in the States remember the Shudos and the Pancrases from the old days. And we just took a few steps in history, thanks to Bart. But before that, what led to those companies and stuff that I feel like I've learned a lot. So, Bart, thank you very much, and we'll be talking soon.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate being on your show. Thank you.